Good morning, St. Francis of Assisi Parish. So, one of the things I really like about the Acts of the Apostles is we have all these different names for what the Christian church, the Catholic Church, looked like. Remember, it wasn't until the 300s that the word Catholic was ascribed to the Christian movement because they were the same thing. They are the same thing. They have been since the 1500s. So, we see already in these first chapters of Acts of the Apostles different titles to call this thing that is Christianity. One of my favorites, and the first one used, and we're going to hear it also this weekend in the gospel, is the way. That these followers of Jesus were described as people of the way, people who followed the way of the cross, who lived in a way different than the rest. Not even the word church are we going to hear until shortly after this passage that we hear today from the 4th chapter of the Acts of the Apostles. Not until the 5th chapter that the word church is even used. And in our first reading for today from Acts of the Apostles, chapter 4, verses 32 through 37, we hear another great explanation of what the church is. It's described as a community of believers. Isn't that a great phrase? A community of believers. Community, as you know, comes from those two words, common, unity. What do they have in common? And so they were of the same mind and the same heart we hear in our first reading today. And no one claimed that any of his possessions were his own, but they had everything in common. So we hear that the apostles, some people were bringing things to the apostles and selling them. Now, this isn't to be confused with communism. They're not being forced to sell the things that they had. But some of them were choosing to freely give what they had to the community. That's what we do when we give at church. We are investing our time, talent, and treasure into this community of believers. It's not we're giving this money to Father so that he has it. It's we're investing in this group of people, and what we have in common, what's our common unity but our belief in the risen Christ. That's what unifies us. So we see in our world today lots of different communities. We see Facebook community, we see people who are left-handed community, the community of those who have seen Tiger King. There's lots of different communities. But all of these communities will fall short. All of them are pretty superficial and shallow, except for the community of believers. Christ will hold us together because Christ is the source of unity. Just as we receive communion, we are united in him. So too, we hear about how we are called in this time to be community to each other. How in this unique situation in which we live are you called to be community? Maybe your physical community has gotten a lot smaller, just the people living in your household. But we're also part of a much larger community of believers. So how can you be church in this time? How is Christ inviting you to be church, to be a valuable part of this community of believers? And we get an example of that at the end of our reading when we hear about the figure of Barnabas. Joseph, we hear later on, thus Joseph, who is also named by the apostles Barnabas. Barnabas is his nickname, like Bubba or Jimmy Bo. I don't know why I went Southern, but Barnabas is a nickname that the apostles gave to him for the way in which he lived. And Barnabas, as we hear in our reading today, means son of encouragement. He was a person who was encouraging. His name is a reflection of his personality. And we can imagine what this Barnabas might have looked like. Because we have lots of people who are people of encouragement in our own parish. I could name a lot of them. Some of you are probably watching this video, but I don't want to embarrass you. But people who are people of encouragement, who build up the community through their encouragement of others. So today I think our reading invites us to think about, one, how are we present to this community of believers? And two, how can we be a person of encouragement to build up this community of believers here today?